ego is a master manipulator and it is a master mimic. It is very good at sounding like it is spiritual and convincing you that it is truth, that it is rational or even loving, just enough to convince you that it is actually your intuition speaking when it is not. It is just your ego.
Welcome to the Lyssn podcast, your space to tune out the noise and tune in to the wisdom that already lives inside you. I'm Alyssa, and through soulful conversations and grounded reflections, we explore what it means to live your bliss, to walk through life aligned, intuitive, embodied, and lit up from within. Because the answers you're seeking, well, you already hold them. The real question is, do you have the courage to listen?
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Lyssn podcast. My name is Alyssa, but you can just call me Lyss. This episode potentially should have been one of the very first ones that I did, but at least I'm getting around to it now. And that is because lately I've had a lot of people asking me, what's your podcast about? What does Lyssn mean? Why have you got it spelt that way? So I thought today we'd get back to the root of why I started this podcast, of how this podcast came to be. And essentially, it all comes down to your ability to learn to listen to your intuition instead of your ego. And determining which one of those voices you're actually hearing and which one to listen to can be a tricky skill to hone. So that's what we're really going to be talking about today. This might be your first time tuning in. If so, hi, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. Okay, so Lyssn is the way we've spelt listen. There's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is because it's a play on my name. My name is Alyssa. Most people call me Lyss. That's my nickname, Lyss. My stage name is Lyss Natalie. Natalie is my middle name, and that is a family name that's kind of been passed down because my grandmother was born on Christmas Day. So Natalie and Natalia, we're Italians, got passed down as well. And I'm Alyssa with a Y. And this is another reason why I spelt it Lyssn with a Y, because your why is fundamental to how you do everything in life. And when your why is at the center, which is where it really should always be, when you are clear on your why, and that is at the center of everything that you do, everything in your life feels aligned and powerful and magical. When you're unclear of that why, that purpose, or if you're making decisions that aren't aligned with that why, that is when everything sort of doesn't fit and it feels like you're just slightly off the track that you should be actually on. And that is one of the main reasons why I chose to spell listen this way, Lyssn. You'll also notice that I spell bliss with a Y as well. And again, this is that play on my name, but also because your why will lead you to your bliss, if that makes sense. So I hope that sort of answers that question, because I have had a few people, especially with bliss, who have mentioned, like, do you know that you're spelling it wrong? Or, it should be spelt with an I. And yeah, it is an intentional, let's call it a branding choice. I'm fully aware that it is spelt Bliss usually. But yeah, that is the reason why you will often find bliss is spelt differently and why listen is spelt the way that it is. So I hope that makes a bit more sense. So when we're talking about listening today, I want to really distinguish between your classic listening, which is with your ears, which is listening to the external things, and listen, Lyssn, which is my brand and version of listening, to tune inward and listen to what is happening within, and to make sure that all of the wisdom within is what we are hearing, as opposed to what we're going to talk about today, the ego being the thing that runs the show. Because most people say that they're following their intuition, but they're actually following their ego in disguise. And so this is a really tricky one to distinguish. So I'm going to give you some tools today to attempt to figure out how you can develop this skill and hone this skill of who is actually talking right now. Is this my ego or is this my intuition? Your intuition is the one that whispers. It's that soft, calm, gentle knowing and wisdom that just sits back and goes, I'm here when you need me. It doesn't feel the need to force itself or to push or to argue. Your ego argues. Your ego will be loud because your ego is afraid of not being heard. Your ego is there to protect you. I want to be very clear here. Your ego has a purpose, and we want to thank our ego. Our ego is there for a very particular reason, and we want to be grateful for what it does for us while also being in control of it and not allowing it to have the microphone all the time and to be running the show. This is the reason why I started this channel, and it really is the core of my life and also my brand and what I want to help people to understand, because I know it may seem incredibly simple, but learning to listen, not with your ears, but listen, Lyssn, with your soul. That is the key to being able to really live your bliss. So let's go a little bit into my backstory, because the way that I learned to listen was out of survival, and it wasn't optional for me. So let's take a little step back in time. In my early 20s, I was living the dream. I was performing full time, singing, dancing, performing on cruise ships, and I absolutely loved it. All I ever wanted was to be able to perform full time. That was the dream for me. And I was living that dream. However, I was not living in an aligned way. I was not listening to my body. I was living with people who did not have my best interest at heart. I was living with people who were manipulative and controlling. I was also working with those people. So not only my home life, but my work life was completely manipulated and controlled by these people. And they stripped me of who I was and my identity. And because I wanted to fit in so badly, I altered who I was. And I thought that they had my best interests at heart, even though when I first met these people, I knew intuitively something told me this environment feels toxic, but I overrode that because my ego wanted me to perform. My ego was like, this is a fantastic opportunity. This is what you need to do. This is where you need to be. This is what you've always wanted. And you're being given the opportunity to do that. So I ignored that inner wisdom that was like, this doesn't feel quite right. This doesn't feel like it's aligned with you. Okay. And I stayed with them for years. I was not listening to my body. I had been in a long-term relationship, my first long-term relationship in my early 20s, and I had experienced a physical violation, and that trauma was something that I never dealt with. And what happened was my body then started developing these symptoms, all very mild and minor at first, things that I could palm off as, oh, I've just eaten a bit too much food, or perhaps I was just a bit bloated because of the type of food that I was eating, or I just had a bit of a tummy ache. Maybe it just didn't sit well with me, whatever it was that I was having. So this experience of me continuously pushing down my emotions and my feelings and this experience that happened to me led to my body going, hang on a second, if you're not willing to deal with this, I'm going to force you to. Which all culminated in one night when I was carried off the cruise ship because I couldn't walk. I was in extreme pain. I had joint pain in my hip, and I ended up in a wheelchair. I ended up in hospital, and I ended up actually moving back home. I was bedridden for 6 months, and my whole world completely disintegrated around me, and it came crashing to this huge tower moment, this dark night of the soul, if you will. So my body and my soul said, no more, girlfriend, we're not doing this anymore, and forced me to stop. In that moment, my entire identity shifted. In that moment, everything that I thought I knew about worthiness and success and productivity completely cracked open. I had so much testing done, and eventually I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Now, when I say I was bedridden for 6 months, I mean I was bedridden for 6 months. I was in my bed in my old room. Mind you, I am somebody who really values my freedom and my individuality, and being someone who had been out and lived outside of my parents' home, having to go back was incredibly humbling. It was definitely what I needed, 100%. I was very grateful to be able to do that. So daily, I was lying in bed. I had no energy. I couldn't walk for a lot of it. I was in so much pain, and I was essentially living in my room, and then as far as I would go would be the bathroom and then back. And for somebody like me who's always led a very active life and who's always been performing and dancing and singing and having this very full life of creativity and joy, all of a sudden I was diminished into this person who couldn't even leave her house, who couldn't even really leave her room. And I remember crawling down the hallway in my parents' house and thinking, this cannot be my life. This is not my story. This is not my body. Why is it betraying me? And I went through so many feelings and emotions, and I couldn't understand, I went through the why is this happening to me situation, right? And I struggled so hard with that. But throughout this period was when I had the biggest growth, and I was able to become the better version of myself. Now, I will also say for my astrology friends out there, I was going through my Saturn return. So this was a big part of that story. And I really needed for my world to crumble because it was built on inauthenticity. It was built on me ignoring my inner wisdom. I got tested for the inflammation in my body and I was extremely high. A normal person, they told me, was 50. I was 1,760. It was astronomical. I remember the professor saying to me, there is no way you are standing in front of me. I do not understand how you are actually here right now. And we need to immediately put you onto a whole host of these different drugs, and essentially told me I'd be on drugs for the rest of my life. I remember going to a gastroenterologist and saying, hey, I noticed when I eat these certain foods that it affects my stomach and it affects how I feel and my flare-ups. And he said to me, this disease has nothing to do with your diet. You can keep eating the way that you're eating. It has nothing to do with your diet. Mind you, this is a gastrointestinal disease. So the minute that he said that to me, I remember alarm bells ringing and me just thinking, how could a gastrointestinal disease have nothing to do with your diet? It made no logical sense to me. So I immediately went over to the IBD clinic in Sydney, in Liverpool, and they were amazing. So big shout out to the guys over there because they were a huge part of my journey. But I remember then them telling me that I'd have to go on all of these different medications and thinking, this cannot be my story. I remember this little voice. It was so powerful. It was very quiet, but I remember the minute she told me I'd be on drugs for the rest of my life, thinking, no, that's not my story. That's not going to happen to me. And I knew in that moment that there was nothing that she could tell me that would change my mind, and that I had the inner power and the inner wisdom to ensure that this would not remain my story. I then made it my mission. I was determined to research everything I could to figure out what this disease was, because essentially what she said to me was there is no known cause and no known cure. And I thought, how is that possible? How do we not know how this developed and how this is created? So I remember watching the documentary Heal, which I highly recommend. It's incredible and it helps to understand the power of the mind-body connection. I made sure that I focused on meditating. I went to see a naturopath. And again, I hadn't been taught to listen to my body. I feel like I was always taught, and I feel like a lot of us have always been taught to outsource our truth and to outsource to someone who is an authority in whatever space it is, especially when it comes to health. It's always like the doctor knows better, or the specialist knows better, or the surgeon knows better, right? And it's like nobody knows your body better than you do. And that is so key because we're so busy going, I don't know what to do. Help me, and looking for external validation and external resources, which is fine when it's coming from a place of, I want to be as informed as possible so I can make the right choices. But most of the time it's fear-based. I don't know what to do. You need to help me because you are an authority in that space. And then when you're told something that doesn't feel right for you in your body, what ends up happening is you, again, what I was doing, quashing that wisdom, squashing that voice and thinking, but that doesn't feel like it's right for me. And that doesn't necessarily sit right with me, or I don't feel the same way, or something about it just feels a little bit off. And instead of saying something, most people just go, no, you know what? They know better because this is what they studied, or because they're the doctor, or they understand the human body better than I do. But the thing is, nobody knows your body better than you do. So really, my real healing didn't actually start with the meditation and the supplements and the change of diet and all of that stuff. It started when I stopped outsourcing my wisdom to others and I started really listening to myself, my inner truth, my inner voice, my soul, my spirit, that wisdom within. And to this day, she has never steered me wrong. Alrighty, let's figure out how to decipher the difference between your ego and your intuition. Both of them are just as important as each other. They are both there for a reason. They both have an important function. Your ego is there to be able to help you to survive when you have lions coming to attack you, and when it's the survival of the fittest and you are attempting to outsmart the other people who are attempting to hurt you, or heaven forbid, kill you, because that's what used to happen back in the day. So your ego is there for a very specific purpose. However, we're no longer living in those types of times. So your ego now is still attempting to protect you, but from invisible enemies and from things that it perceives as being a threat. Most of the time in today's day and age, this is people on social media, or other people that don't agree with you, or your invisible thought process in your head where you feel like everybody's watching you, or everybody's paying attention to what you're doing, or everybody's thinking about you way more than they actually are. Let's be honest, most people are not paying any attention to you and what's going on in your life because they're too busy worrying about themselves and what's going on in their lives, right? So that's our ego. Our ego tends to be loud. Our ego really thrives off you not only hearing it, our ego really thrives off fear. If something feels scary and fearful to you, and I'm not talking about stretchy is like, ooh, that threshold feels like it's a little bit further than what I'm used to, but it feels good. Like that feels exciting. It feels like I'm getting out of that comfort zone, but not in a way where I'm terrified of what's going to happen on the other side, in a way where it's like, yeah, cool. That's stretchy. Scary is like, oh my gosh, no, I would rather, bury myself into a hole, like find a cave somewhere and hide away, because that just feels way too scary and terrifying. And that's that fear base, right? It comes back to, if you've ever listened to my podcast or if you've ever worked with me before, we always come back to the body and ask, is this expansive, or does my body contract at the thought of this? And I'm not talking about the mind, we're talking about the body. What that exercise does is it helps you to figure out what's intuition and what is ego. So here's the thing. Both of those voices live inside you. Your ego is often the loudest voice. Your ego thrives on validation. It thrives on fear. It thrives on reactivity and logic and that obsessive control that's like always searching for certainty and validation and safety. Like I said, it's that survival instinct, but it is usually loud, as opposed to your intuition. And that is that beautiful, soft, gentle whisper. It's almost sometimes like a hum. I feel like I often tune into my hum in my womb space and I'm like, ooh, there it is. That like juicy little hum that has all of the goodness flowing like honey, and it's there ready to draw you in, tantalize you in. It's very sensual, actually. Our intuition can be very sensual, because it speaks through sensations and truth and knowing, right? It's the rose opening and blooming. It's that safe space, that womb space, that warm womb space, that cozy space that says, come here, let me envelop you in a hug. Just bask in my coziness, my comfiness, right? That's your intuition. It's that space where you can make a decision and feel 100% okay with it, even if the other people in your life are like, that makes no sense. Why are they doing that, right? Your ability to listen to that voice is crucial because your intuition always knows. Your ego, on the other hand, is always wanting proof. It always is searching for proof. But your intuition doesn't necessarily need the proof because it already knows what is true. It's that full body yes. It is your ability to go, I feel so lit up that nothing else matters. It's okay that people don't agree with me. I feel safe and content knowing that this is what is right and true and real for me. And it's not always going to be the same for everybody. That's the beauty of our own intuition, because we're not all here to do the same things. How boring would the world be if we all agreed on everything and we all were doing the exact same thing? That's not a world that I want to live in, right? We need the color. We need the beauty of different cultures, different opinions, different belief systems. So your ego's reason for being is to protect you. Your intuition, however, guides you towards growth and your purpose, which sometimes can be a little bit painful. Oftentimes, when people make a really aligned intuitive choice, they'll go down that path and be like, why on earth did I go down this path? This one's full of pain and frustration, and I have to deal with all of this stuff, and it's not fun, it's not enjoyable, it's not easy. But often that's the point, because it's leading you down that path in order for your greatest and highest good. And that is what your intuition will always do, so that you can become the best version of you. And isn't that what we all should be striving for? We all should be striving to become the best and highest version of ourselves. Because if the world does that, the world is a completely different place to the one that we're currently living in. And how exciting will that be? So I did actually write down some examples of the difference between things that your ego will say to you and things that your intuition will say to you, so that you can get a bit of a clearer picture as to what this might look like for you. So your ego says, don't do that, you're going to fail. Your ego is going to stop you before you even take action on things, right? And again, it's protecting you from experiencing that pain. But as we know, when we have resistance, that is when we grow. When there is resistance to something and you avoid feeling that resistance will continue to persist, because what you resist persists, right? But when you have that resistance and you meet that resistance where it is, that's where you will find this beautiful blossoming and expansion and growth. So your intuition will say to you, it's okay. You're allowed to be scared, and you're ready even if you are scared. Your ego will say things like, you need to prove your worth. You're not ready yet. Your intuition will say, you're already enough and you don't need to prove yourself because you are worthy just as you are. Your ego is the voice that's always screaming in your head going, oh, but what's everybody else going to think? If you're constantly worried about what everyone else is going to think, you are stuck in your ego. And when you can get out of that egoic mind and get into your intuition, you're no longer going to worry about what everyone else thinks. You're going to be more worried about, how do you feel? Because at the end of the day, when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to be worried about what anyone else thinks. You're going to be worried about how you didn't follow that nudge and follow that intuitive feeling that was leading you towards a path that you would have felt so beautiful and juicy and delicious, because it was exactly what was meant for you, but instead you resisted and you decided, no, I'm going to pull back from this. At the end of the day, we don't care about the decisions that we made for everybody else. Generally, at the end of the day, we're not worried about what everyone else thought. We're too busy regretting that we cared so much about what everybody else thought and wishing that we had have done what it was that we wanted to do. And this is a lesson that I've struggled with a little bit because I feel like there can be family ties and cultural things and friendships, and a lot of people will often attempt to guilt you into making a decision that they're not attempting to control you intentionally, but they're operating out of their egoic, fear-based space. And so what works for one person isn't always going to work for the next person, and vice versa. What doesn't work for one person doesn't mean that it's not going to work for the next person. So when somebody's experienced something and for them it hasn't worked, or for them it's been a difficult road, or that's just because it wasn't aligned with them and it wasn't for them. But it doesn't mean that it's not for you. But when they're attempting to stop you from taking those steps towards that, then it's coming from fear-based love. And what we want to do is make decisions from love. And sometimes that means allowing somebody to do something that you might not necessarily agree with, but that might be right for them. So the hardest part about this is that the ego is a master manipulator and it is a master mimic. It is very good at sounding like it is spiritual and convincing you that it is truth, that it is rational or even loving, just enough to convince you that it is actually your intuition speaking when it is not. It is just your ego. And that is actually how we end up saying things like, this just doesn't feel quite right to me, when it's actually a fear of being seen in your fullness. Or my intuition told me to wait, when it's actually your perfectionism and it's just being disguised as, ooh, that doesn't feel quite right and I need to be a bit more patient, or I'm not quite ready yet. The ego always speaks from a place of wounding, and that is one of the easiest ways to be able to determine between the two, because the minute that you hear what it is that that little voice is telling you and you go, is this speaking from a wound? If you can determine yes, which it's pretty easy usually to be able to tell that, then you know it's not your intuition. And you can tune back in and go, okay, hey, intuition, where are you? I know that you're in here somewhere. I need you to speak up. I'm tuning in, but I need you to meet me halfway. What's the truth of this? Where are we really at? What's the best way to approach this? Because your intuition speaks from a place of wholeness. And the important thing is learning to differentiate between the two. And like I said before, listening to your soul is understanding your why. And when you really know your why, you can take action from the space of that why to be able to show up with truth, with authenticity, without fear, with unconditional love. Your why becomes your reason for healing, your reason for choosing yourself, your reason for just choosing differently, your reason for showing up. So listening with a why isn't just a fun play on my name or the ability to listen to your soul. This is a movement inviting you to tune out the noise of the world and to come back to tuning into that frequency of your own truth. Because the best way that I've discovered to heal, to create, to just be, to live in alignment is to listen, not just to hear, but to truly listen to your body, to your intuition, to that little voice that never really truly left, but just got buried beneath all of the weight and the noise. So our pivot point should be pretty clear to you this week. In every moment, we have two choices. You can choose to let your ego keep running the show, to keep living from this space of fear and survival mode, chasing validation, playing small, and staying so busy that you can't actually hear what it is that your intuition is actually telling you and what is most aligned with you and what is for you and that why, that purpose. Or you can pause, you can breathe, you can listen. And you can really tune in to that intuition, that voice that you were born with, that has been with you your entire life, that as a child was uninhibited and you heard so clearly. But then society and people and cultures and religions and politics all got in the way and taught you how to not be you. One keeps you hustling. The other brings you home. This is my legacy. This is what I want to leave to the world. If even just one person learns to listen to themselves, then I have done what I set out to do with this podcast. So, my loves, you need to ask yourself, have you had enough yet? Have you had enough of listening to that fear-based ego voice and letting it be so loud that it drowns out the truth of who you really are? I made the decision to stop listening to that voice many years ago now, and it was one of the best decisions that I ever made. The end part of my Crohn's story, I actually said to them, how long do I have before I need to go on these medications and do all of this stuff? They said 12 weeks is all we can give you. After that, it is imperative that you go onto these drugs. And I said, okay. I changed my diet, I meditated, did all those things. And I went back to them 12 weeks later. They retested me. The registrar was so confused when he saw the number pop up that he had to go get the professor because he thought it was a mistake. She also thought it was a mistake. So she said, no, we're going to have to go into the actual results that they sent through from the labs. She said it must be a typo. They went into the actual original of the report and I had brought it down to 87, remembering 50 is normal. So I wasn't quite down to normal. But from 1,760 in 12 weeks, just through meditation and diet and making some lifestyle changes, that was what had shifted everything. Because I started listening to my body. I started listening to my inner wisdom. And I started living aligned with that wisdom, trusting it, following it. Now, this is not to say that that was the end of that story, and we can talk more about that at another point in time. That experience completely changed my life. And from that moment on, I have always listened to myself, even when it meant disappointing my loved ones, even when it meant doing things that people around me just didn't understand. And that is hard. It is hard to stand in your truth in the face of disappointment, especially from those that you love. But I do know that at the end of my life, I'm not going to be looking back with regrets and wondering what would have happened. What if I had have trusted that little voice, that little niggle inside? Because I know that every step of the way, I've trusted that voice, and I know that I wouldn't have this rich, full, beautiful life that I have now if I hadn't have had the courage to really listen to myself and that inner wisdom. Okay, I now want to take you through a short visualization. So wherever you are, if it is safe to do so, I want you to close your eyes. And I have this visualization that I want to take you through, which I've done with a lot of my clients. So if you have worked with me before, you probably know this one. I want you to take a slow breath in through the nose, close down your eyes, and exhale through the mouth. 2 more deep breaths here. And out. 1 last breath. Deep inhale through the nose. And release everything with this exhale. Keeping your eyes closed, I want you to imagine that you are in a car. You're driving down a beautiful, long, open road. This road is a metaphor for the journey of your life. It represents your path. The sun is shining through the windscreen. The air smells like freedom. And you can feel that familiar hum of possibility just in your womb space, in your chest. It feels yummy. It feels warm and tingly, exciting, that butterflies in your tummy. Now, we're going to pick up your ego, and your ego is going to come along for the ride because your ego is always with you. So we're going to stop the car. If you haven't already, pick up your ego on the side of the road, and they're going to take the rest of this trip with you. This road represents your choices, your growth, your truth. It's your path. Now I want you to have a look around the car. Who's driving? Is it you or is it your ego? There's no wrong answers here, but this will be a good indication of how you may be living your life. If it's your ego, if your ego is driving right now, that is okay. It's been keeping you safe your whole life, but safety and alignment are two very different things. So if that's the case, we're going to take back control of the vehicle. If your ego is sitting in the passenger seat, that's okay too. I want you to put your hands steady on the wheel. And I want you to keep your eyes on the horizon. I want you to also recognize that your ego is fragile. Your ego is fear-based. Your ego is concerned that you're not taking the right turns or that you're not doing the right things. And the ego is there to protect you. So the ego being in the passenger seat is not an ideal place either, because the ego could very easily grab onto the steering wheel and cause you to swerve, could grab onto your handbrake and pull up. We don't want the ego to have the ability to have that much control over where it is that we're going. So if your ego is in the passenger seat, we're going to say thank you, but this is not where we want it to be either. If your ego was in the back seat, okay, this is much better. They don't have as much control over the vehicle by being in the front, but in the back seat, they can still be a backseat driver. And that's not fun either. Nobody loves a backseat driver. And there's nothing worse than somebody who is anxious, sitting in the back seat and constantly calling out and telling you to watch out for things, or that you're not taking the right route to wherever it is that you need to go, right? So I want you gently, with love, to pull over the car, to get out with your ego. I want you to give your ego a hug. I want you to thank your ego, because your ego is still part of you. Your ego is not the enemy. We just don't want it to steer the direction of our life anymore. Thank your ego for everything that it's done for you, for helping you to get this far on the journey. Tell your ego that you are ready to drive now and you don't need its help. And that if you do, you will ask for it. But for right now, you need the ego to jump in the boot. The boot is safe. It's a place where your ego can rest, away from the world, where it's not going to be anxious all the time because it's constantly searching for all of the things that could possibly be a threat to you. Now, I want you to get back into the car, into the driver's seat. I want you to take a deep breath, grip the wheel gently but firmly. Turn up the music on whatever your intuition's favorite song is. And I want you to start driving. The road is open. The path is yours. Your intuition knows exactly where you're going. You're going to come to a fork in the road. Usually your ego would be the one to make this decision. I want you to tune into your intuition. Are you going to go right or are you going to go left? What feels good for you? Take one more deep breath. And when you're ready, I want you to open your eyes. This is how we rewire the patterns. It's not about fighting our ego. It's about reassigning it and being aware of what its purpose is and what its job is and why we have it in the first place, and then allowing it to come along for the journey, but not allowing it to drive the car. Because if you're allowing your ego to run the show, you're never going to be living a truly authentic life. And you're never really going to know what it is that is right and true for you because you're too busy squashing your intuition and listening to the ego instead. So the struggle that people have is knowing the difference between the two. If you are still not sure which one it is that you're hearing, this really quick embodiment practice usually helps to instantly be able to figure out what it is that you're hearing. And it's super quick. It's just a 60-second practice that you can do. Placing one hand on my heart, one hand on my belly, taking a couple of deep breaths, closing down the eye space. And I know I've done this one many times before with you guys, and I've done it on the podcast before. Asking yourself, does my body expand or contract at the thought of this? If it expands, my body, not my mind, if my body expands, it is my intuition. Often our body can expand, but our mind might contract. That's your ego. The contraction is your ego in your mind. Your contraction in your body is your intuition, right? Body, intuition, mind, ego. You will be amazed at how quickly you begin to trust your body and your body begins to trust you again. If this episode stirred something in you, if you are ready to rebuild your relationship with your own intuition, to start living a life that is joyful, aligned, and authentic and intuitive, then this is the type of work that I do with women. I help women to step out of burnout, to step into their intuitive power and to step into their feminine power and build freedom-based businesses so that they can show up aligned, authentic, and thriving. Whether it's one-on-one mentoring, joining one of my coaching programs, or perhaps it is learning to build an online business just like I have in a soft, sustainable, and authentic way, you don't have to walk the path alone. So come on over to Instagram and you can find me at Lyss Natalie or Lyssn podcast, of course, spelled Lyssn podcast. I would love to connect with you and hopefully we can find the right path that is waiting for you. So as always, my loves, we're going to finish up with a whisper from within. Where in your life have you been mistaking control for clarity and confusing the safety of your ego with the truth of your intuition? I promise you, hand on heart, that if you can learn to quieten the noise and truly listen, that you will find the right next step for you that has been waiting for you all along. Thank you for being here with me, my loves. I will see you next week. Keep listening to yourself as always and keep loving your people. Thank you for listening, beautiful soul. If you felt something shift, please reflect on it, share it, and let it ripple out into the world. If something spoke to your heart space today, I would love if you could share it with someone that you love and leave us a review, which will really help more of our soul fam to find their way here. If you want to connect with me, if you have questions, topics, if you want to know more about my courses, or if you even just want to say hi, please reach out. I would love to hear from you. Come find me over on Instagram at Lyssn podcast. That's LYSSN podcast. Or you can message me directly at Lyss Natalie. My DMs are always open. Until next time, stay soft, stay true, keep living your bliss, and remember, your soul's song is always worth remembering. So keep listening.